You're listening to The White Rabbit, conversations on the art of presenting in a rather noisy world. Your hosts are Matt Krause and Alper Rosanes. Matt helps leaders of international companies speak, write, and present with confidence. Alper is a communications trainer and a startup investor with a diverse portfolio of companies in Barcelona. If you like this podcast, please share it with friends and colleagues. Now, on to Matt and Alper for today's conversation.
Alper, for today's podcast, I want to interview you on something, and that's other ways into the world of angel investing. Is that okay?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. And what brought this up is that in recent months, I don't know why, maybe the universe is telling me something, but a number of people have said to me that, because I've asked them, what would you want to do if you had your dream job? And a lot of them have said, I would like to be an angel investor. But you know, a lot of
as
us
a job.
As a job.
Okay, that's interesting.
And a lot of us, though, are walking around with the misconception that we've got to have, $100 gazillion in the bank in order to be an angel investor. And I was thinking about other ways into angel investing, and I was wondering if there were other ways into it. And then I thought, wait a minute, in the podcast intro and in some of our conversations, you and I, is mentioned that Alper is an angel investor in Barcelona. And as far as I know, you didn't do it through having $1 gazillion in the bank. Is that correct?
Now, why would you assume that? Why would you assume that I don't have $1 gazillion in the bank?
Well, because you don't have a Learjet.
I have a Bombardier.
Bombardier. Okay, that's a close second. That's maybe not $1 gazillion in the bank, but that's at least $100 million in the bank.
Yeah.
So I was thinking there must be some alternative ways into being an angel investor that do not involve having $1 gazillion in the bank.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you about that. How did you get into this world of angel investing?
Well, it all started, I think it was during the pandemic. And before that, I was already working with startups who wanted to get better at their investor pitches. So we were working together. I was training them. I was coaching them. I was also preparing the pitch decks. And then I realized, hang on a second, throughout the past 10 years, there have been significant advancements in my business lead, business development, let's say, when I had skin in the game. And I realized this was also an opportunity, I think, to have skin in the game, to be able to position myself as someone who works with startup founders on their pitches, also who happens to be having skin in the game. So that was my primary motivation. And my angel in this case was my mentor here in Barcelona, Mateo Carenzo. We talked about him so many times in the podcast before. I learned everything about angel investing from him. I keep learning from him as well. So he was the first one to tell me that there was this project that he was already invested, and I showed interest, and that's how I started with my first company. I think it was in 2021.
Okay. And before we get deeper into that, let's back up a second. So you're coming to it from a pitch deck and presentation perspective, but it sounds like any skill that a startup could use, you could probably leverage that skill for that. Like, let's say you've never done a presentation in your life, but you're a supply chain person, or you're a finance person, or whatever. Maybe you're a call center person or a marketing person or whatever. Whatever transferable skill, if an employer is paying you for that skill now, it's probably good enough for a startup to use. Is that a correct assumption that I'm making?
I would think so, yeah.
Okay.
It's definitely transferable, yeah.
So you don't have to be a presentation person. If you have any transferable skill, you could use it for this purpose. Is that correct?
Can you define or clarify what you mean by this purpose? Like to start a company?
So to be an angel investor in a startup company. Like, let's say that, for example, I'm a supply chain person. and I am wondering if I can use my supply chain skills
Hmm.
to become an angel investor if I can find the right startup that needs supply chain work of some sort. What do you think about that? Could I get into that world that way?
Let me think of that for a second. Let me think
Uh,
about that for a second because I happen to have the communication business, which is 100% aligned with one of the most crucial needs of the founders, which was to face investors, to talk to them, to
yeah.
communicate to them, to be im- to impress them in such a way that they would actually decide to invest in the company.
Uh-huh.
But I would also say you don't have to have any skill or transferable skill to participate in a startup and become
Okay.
an angel investor. You just need to be able to write a check or make a wire transfer.
Yeah.
So in that regard, if this is something that you want to implement in your life, I don't think you need to bring any skill at all, at least to start with. Of
Okay.
course, if you bring skills which could be beneficial to the company, of course, I'm sure that they would be more than happy to receive your guidance.
Uh-huh.
But in my case, I think at the moment I have like 13 companies in my portfolio. Only with two of them I am actively helping with their pitch decks.
Okay.
We have regular meetings. The rest of the 11, they may not even know my name.
So, okay. So let's dive back into the story of how you got started.
Hmm.
So it's during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Your mentor in Barcelona there
Hmm.
has some projects on the table, and you say, "Hey, I'd like to get involved with those too."
Yes.
So then what happens next?
He asked if I was sure about that.
Okay. And by the way, tell us for a second, why did he ask you if you were sure about that? Did he have doubts that maybe it wasn't a good idea?
Because as far as I know, there's not a riskier form of investment.
Ah,
As far as
yeah,
I know, I mean,
true.
beyond my knowledge, there might be,
Yeah.
but I think it's one of the riskiest types of investment there is.
Okay. Okay.
Like 50% of the time, you're going to lose your money and there's no turning back.
Yeah, so let's say that I'm using some skill, whatever. I'm getting into it for, let's go to the extreme. Let's say I'm getting into it for $0. I have $0 in the bank, but
Hmm.
I have this awesome presentation skill that startup companies desperately want.
Hmm.
And so you're saying that even if I'm not putting any money into it, let's say I'm putting time into it, I'm putting 100 hours of time.
Yes.
So you're saying that I might lose all 100 hours of that time. I might
No.
become rich and I might, fly around on a Bombardier or Learjet, but I might also, and am probably more likely to, lose all 100 hours of that time investment. Is that correct?
Well, that is, I mean, yes, of course, it's correct. But since you're not putting any money, you wouldn't be losing money. You will be losing
Okay.
time.
Yeah.
But also, in that case, this would be a mutually beneficial arrangement for you and for them. So you would
Okay.
probably be asking for equity in return of the services that you will be providing.
Okay.
And if things pick up in the future with that company, if your equity gets more value, then it's great. But if the company goes out of business, then you will end up with nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to that moment where you decide to move forward with this. So
Hmm.
we're in the pandemic. Your mentor has some projects on the table.
Hmm.
You say, "Hey, I want to get on that." He says, "Are you sure?" And it sounds like you probably said, "Yeah, I want in on that." Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
So
at the time,
what happened next?
well, I started learning about the company that he was talking about,
Uh-huh.
and once I was decided, we got in touch. You sign a agreement, and basically you wire the money.
Okay.
In my case, it was. I'm trying to remember what was it called. I don't remember the official name of the agreement, but it's basically an agreement stating that you're lending this amount of money in exchange of. There wasn't a mention of the percentage or equity in that regard because
Mm.
it was a loan agreement, a convertible
Okay.
loan agreement. Okay, I remember that now. So
Yeah.
basically, what happened is you participate in the loan for the company, and then it
Uh-huh.
is converted into equity at a later date.
Okay. So, if I remember correctly, you called this at one point a convertible note. Is that correct?
Yes.
So, other than taking a strict equity position where, I'm providing a skill and the entrepreneur says, I'm going to give you 1% or 10% or whatever, some percent of the company,
Hmm.
there are other ways into it. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, the easiest way would probably be to use an instrument like a convertible note and
Uh-huh.
participate in the equity at a later date.
Okay. And you mentioned writing a check at one point. So, are you just providing, on the one end of the spectrum, there's providing your time only.
Hmm.
And then on the other end of the perspective, there's writing a really big check for $100 million.
Hmm.
Where in the spectrum were you on this?
In terms of time versus money,
Yeah.
this was only money. That I wasn't involved time wise with this company, at least
Okay.
with the first one.
So if let's say that I'm, for example, I'm a presentation designer in Istanbul,
Hmm.
and I want to be an angel investor, but I have $0 in the bank. I have
Hmm.
tons of time, but I have $0 in the bank.
Okay.
Could I become an angel investor by saying, hey guys, I'll help you out with your pitch presentation in return for a convertible note or some percent of the equity? Or do I also need to write a check for some money?
Well, technically, yes, you can participate in that regard, but I would
Uh,
assume, and when I say I assume, I would open myself to harsh criticism from a more knowledgeable person. I would
okay.
assume that this company would be at a very early stage, probably
Mm-hmm.
pre-revenue, probably
Okay.
one stage beyond, hey, I have an interesting idea,
Uh-huh.
but
Ah,
nothing
okay.
about, hey, we have our supply chain, we have our product design, we have our investors, etc.,
Yeah.
etc. In that
So,
regard, I think you
uh,
might be able to negotiate an equity versus services rendered deal with them.
okay.
And of course, that's possible.
So, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it sounds like if I'm that guy with $0 in the bank, but a ton of time that I could donate, so I'm definitely gonna get bragging rights to my friends and potential girlfriends by saying, "Hey, I'm an angel investor, but I might not be flying around on a Learjet later." Is that kind of
Just not yet. Yeah, maybe in the
okay?
future. The probabilities are still pretty slim on that, but
uh-huh.
it's not impossible. Yeah.
And then some potential cautionary notes. So tell me how these angel investments turn into cash. So I've got, let's say 1% equity in this company, and I would love to take these bragging rights to my that I can currently use, over beers with my friends, saying, "Hey, I'm an angel investor. I own a portion of this company, blah blah blah,
Hmm.
and I want to put actual cash in my pocket." So tell me, how does that happen? The actual cash in pocket.
Well, if you have an equity agreement with them in exchange of your services,
Uh-huh.
as far as I know, they would have to go through another investment round where other
Okay.
investors come onto the table, and
Okay.
the company would have to be attractive enough to get attention of other potential investors. In
Uh-huh.
that case, you might be able to say, hey, by the way, from the starting of this company, I have my 2% stake in it. Now
Uh-huh.
we're raising cash. So would you be interested in buying that? And if you
Ah.
find interested parties in your shares, or maybe the founders themselves, since I'm assuming that at this point the company is growing and it is more
Yeah.
promising than just, you lying on the bed and thinking, hey, that would be a great idea stage.
Uh, uh,
If you can find interested parties who would be willing to buy your shares, then you could be able to turn them into cash.
so let me see if I'm hearing you correctly. So, as one of these potential angel investors, like my friends who say, "Hey, I want to be an angel investor too. If one of these days I quit my job and blah blah blah, and I want to brag to my friends over beers, and I'm an angel investor." So, one of the cautionary notes that they need to know about is that yeah, that 1% of that company is going to give you bragging rights with your friends over beers. But if you want to turn it into cash, you're going to depend on the decision of the entrepreneur who started the company. And does the entrepreneur want to go through a liquidity event of some sort and sell part of the company? Is that correct?
I'm not 100% sure about that because I don't know how liquidity events are triggered. They may be
Okay.
triggered out of necessity. And in that
Uh-huh.
case, I think based on your agreement that you have with them, I'm not sure if they need to be 100% on board with you
Uh-huh.
selling your shares. I believe there are agreements in which, but I may be wrong about this, but
Okay.
I believe, as far as I know, there are agreements in which you are free to do whatever you want with your equity.
Okay. And one more question before we
Sure.
wrap it up for today. So, you having gone through this process and having some experience with it, well, actually, how many companies did you say you were involved with? 17 or something like that?
No, I think at the moment it's 13, but one of them finished their operations very
Ah,
recently.
okay. Uh-huh.
So I think I'm down to 12.
Okay. So, you have a dozen or more experiences with this. So, you're not a total newbie. Uh,
No,
so,
it's been a
given
while.
that
Yeah.
you, yeah, given that you have some experience in this field, uh, tell us some of the other pros or cons. If you wanted someone who's thinking about getting into it, if you were having a conversation with someone who's thinking about getting into it, what advice would you give to that person?
I think one of the, I wouldn't say challenge, but one of the realities is that I think some people have the mistaken belief that just because they are invested in a company,
Uh
they are going to be invited to the board meetings, company events,
huh.
or,
Uh
they're going to be able to call up the CEO and say, hey, so tell me about what happened this week. It doesn't work like that. Like I said, I am invested in some companies who are completely oblivious to my existence. And just because I send some cash to them doesn't entitle me to any demand of like operations or financials or whatever, apart
huh.
from the periodical sharings of information that they do. So I
Okay.
would say, since we talked in the beginning of how this could be one of the riskiest forms of investment to my knowledge,
Uh huh. Uh huh.
I would say it's a very emotional decision with
Okay.
a lot of ups and downs, with a lot of turmoil during the process.
Yeah.
And you need to be absolutely comfortable with the idea that once you make this transfer, there is no coming back. You're
Yeah.
not going
And
to see one penny out of this large amount that you're sending. So it's not an insignificant decision, by the way. It's not a
uh huh.
small thing to come to terms with.
Okay.
So that would be one of my first recommendation to
Okay.
look deep into yourself and decide how comfortable you would be with this idea.
Uh huh.
Because like I said, for example, I have one company that sees their operations, so it's a 100% loss.
Yeah.
I have, I think, one or two zombies.
Uh
Zombies are companies that don't thrive, but they don't die as well. It's like,
huh. Sure.
okay, maybe something will come out of them. And
Uh-huh.
I have had some pretty successful ones as well.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, I think it's just a matter of being comfortable with uncertainty over a long period of time, because
Uh-huh.
at the end of the day, you're not sending them some money that you found on the street. You're sending them
Yeah.
some money that it took years maybe for you to accumulate through hard
Yeah.
work and sweat and tears and everything. So it's like, once you push that button, we don't write checks
Uh-huh.
anymore. Once you push that button, and once all you're left with is a PDF of the transfer, and it's like, okay, do whatever you want with it, and then the uncertainty starts. So I would
Uh-huh.
say it's an emotional process. So this is something that you need to think very carefully
And,
about.
and we only have a few moments before we need to wrap up, but I do want to squeeze in one last question here. And
Sure.
you've mentioned a couple times that it's an emotional decision.
Hmm.
Uh, what kind of emotion should I have going for me? Should I, love the industry, or it's like I think I really hit it off with the founder, or I really want to be an angel investor. What kind of emotion are you talking about? What kind of emotion should I have going for me?
It's difficult to say the kind of emotion that you should have going for you, but I was
Uh-huh.
talking about the ways that you deal with uncertainty and loss.
Okay.
So there is a known difference between business angels and venture capitalists. So
Yeah.
a VC is more involved, I think, I believe in the financials of the company, and
Oh,
they usually don't enter very early into the game.
okay.
However, I'm not a VC, I'm a BA, and a BA is more, I think, wanting to be aligned with the founder on a personal level, on a social level, or be aligned more with the goals of the company. So there are some emotions going on in there. Like, for example, I wouldn't want to be invested in a company whose founder I wouldn't be able to stand for 2 minutes in the same room.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
That's my type of personality. That's my type of investor profile, let's say. There could
Okay.
be other people who say, I don't give a, I don't care, let's say. I don't
Uh-huh.
care. I don't care about the guy's or girl's personality. I'm just looking after my returns. Okay, that's a different investor profile.
Yeah. True.
But the emotional aspect I was mostly mentioning was about the ways you deal with uncertainty and loss of capital. Because
Okay.
I mean, I've heard so many times in this world that with angel investing or with startup investing, losing at least some part of your money, it's not a matter of if you're going to lose it or not. It's a matter of when you're going to lose it.
Ah, yeah.
Like I
Okay.
said, I went 3 years thinking that, look, all those people that lost money, obviously they didn't know something. So it's been 3 years. I haven't lost. And then I received this email. It's like, we are ending operations.
uh,
It's like I lost my virginity in that
yeah.
regard.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up here, just let me just make sure that I can go back to these people with something intelligent to say. So if somebody says to me, "Hey, I'd like to be an angel investor," I need to find out if they have at least a little bit of cash in the bank, more than $0. And if they do have $0 in the bank and they're just looking for some completely other way to get into it, let's say trading time, then they need to prepare themselves for the fact that the company that they're investing in might just be, some kid crashing on his buddy's couch.
Yes,
And okay,
most
so
certainly. Yes, yes.
if they want to get in for no money, they need to, how would we say it diplomatically, severely limit their expectations. Okay.
By the way,
Okay.
I mean, it's not a matter of choosing between zero money and $1 million, because there are also platforms which allow you to participate in startups, and I'm a member of one of those platforms. You can start small. You can start with I don't know, 2,000, 3,000 or something like that, and of course your shares are going to be small in that correlation.
Yeah.
But at least you will be able to observe yourself, how you're feeling, how your soul is responding to that, and maybe get bigger and bigger in time. You don't have to start with a significant amount that will destroy you in the event of a total loss.
Okay.
You can start small, because I think the other scenario in which you don't invest any money, just your skills, like I said, it's not impossible, but I think the probability is pretty low.
Okay. All right. So thank you very much for the advice today.
Thank you.
And my friends who have asked about this will be very happy to have some direction, however painful it might be.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Alper, and I will talk to you next week.
I'll
then.
talk to you. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to The White Rabbit with Matt Krause and Alper Rosanes. You can subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or through your favorite feed.